our book talk today with our esteemed authors, Kock and Michiel Heyns. They don't need much of an introduction. They're both well known very locally and abroad. They're both translators. They both famously worked on Agaat and Triomf. Jan is a poet with 3 volumes of poetry, and Michiel is a very, very prolific author. You have 5 novels, am I correct?
6.
6. Okay, 6. With the latest being Invisible Furies. Liam, I'd like to start the conversation with you on the topic of Triomf. Triomf, in my opinion, and according to many critics, set a benchmark as a post-colonial and post-apartheid text in South Africa. How did it end up that you translated this work, and close to 20 years after its original publication, how do you feel about it now?
Well, it just so happened that Marlene and I were both fellow sufferers working at UNISA, where we were insurrectionists against the institution, and we lift clubbed from Johannesburg to Cape Town, to Pretoria every morning, Cape Town, and we sort of got to know each other in that way. And I think she reviewed my first volume of poetry, Blood Song, very interestingly in Agaat in the late 90s, and she had been struggling with Triomf as a so-called untranslatable text because it is written in a melange of something almost similar to Kock's, where there's so many languages, but particularly so much demotic English embedded in Afrikaans that it seemed to be almost impossible to translate. And she had had 1 or 2 bad experiences, so she approached me, and I said, hang on, I must read it again, because like many other people, I'd read the first chapter of Triomf and shuddered from it. And it was very close to my own upbringing. I grew up quite close by, just over the hill there. And then I went back to the novel, and I realized it was an astounding work of I'd almost say late modernist fiction, reminiscent of Faulkner in its power and its localism.
Yeah, it's searing novel.
And so there began a process of working. I had a sabbatical near Boston, and I was living in a glass sort of house near the sea in the winter months, and just wrote. And came back and negotiated and had the messy process of translation finishing, which is something we might want to talk about. But the negotiating with Marlene and trying to get both of us happy was not easy at all. It's an exceedingly difficult process. And but messy is the term, and I'm now once again encountering the process of translation as extremely messy. Emotionally messy, messy in terms of sorting things out, and almost impossible to get a text come out of all that appears calm and placid on the page. Not that Triomf appears calm and placid.
Absolutely not.
But yes, we actually did it. We had some momentous happenings during that translation. I won't go into all, but we had to change track in the middle of the translation because we got an overseas contract and we were originally translating for the South African market, and Marlene said, no, we've got to wipe out all these Afrikaans words in English. And I said, no, we can't do that, you know. Okay, we have to do it. And then we sat together. I went and sort of stayed in her cottage for a week, and we brainstormed all day. And then in the middle of the night one night, I said, I refuse to throw this demotic Afrikaans translation away. And I proposed to her that we make a South African version alongside the English version. And so it became an extremely impossible business. Difficult, but it worked. And yes, 20 years after, or 10 years afterwards, I think I'm very happy with that translation. Marlene once said to me, it's not finished till it's finished.
Is it ever finished?
But you know, you get to a point where you're approaching a publication deadline, and you get impatient and you get sick of it. At one point I said to Marlene, you know, how much longer can we carry on like this? Every time you read the proofs, you start changing this stuff. And she said, it's not finished till it's finished. It was a fundamental lesson for me. So forget about publishing deadlines. You can shift them. If you're not finished, it's not done. It's not, because Marlene was so apprehensive about the hawks, the falca, the critics waiting, the others who are going to read it guardedly and jealously. And she's right. So I'm very happy about it. It went down very well. It was not what I wanted to become sort of famous in a minor note for, but it was. the end.
Michiel, I'd like to ask you, I mean, you've done the widely acclaimed version of English translation of Agaat. I mean, it's a novel that is so richly complex in its narrative voice and the different strategies that are across the board in that novel. How did you tackle the complexities of translating an almost untranslatable text?
Yeah, I like Leon's term of negotiation. I mean, Humberto Eco talks of translation as negotiation. And that's very much what it is. It's as you go. I mean, I also had this experience that when I first looked at Agaat, well, I first read Agaat, and then Marlene said to me, I think Leon said he wasn't going to translate it, so she asked me. And I said, no ways, you know, you can't translate it. And then I sat down, and then you start negotiating. All you can do is sit down with a page and see what you can come up with. And Marlene was very encouraging, which helped. And, you know, once you're into it, when you get to a point where you can't pull out anymore, you're committed to it. And then you just carry on blindly. And like Leon, I was very grateful for the opportunity. I think Agaat is a wonderful novel. It was certainly an education translating it, and very satisfying in the end. Yes, messy. I know Leon wrote an article, something like never translate a novel by...
Never translate anyone but a dead author.
Anyone but a dead author.
I second that again.
Okay.
It's true that, well, it's a moot point, because Marlene was very helpful and she was very encouraging. It is true, though, and perhaps more so with other novels I've translated than Agaat, that you also have to negotiate with the author, because the author has notions of his or her own. And that often complicates things. That's maybe where the mess comes in, that in the end, I mean, sometimes we reach a deadlock. We have to say, well, you know, I've had to say to an author, you're just going to have to trust me on this because I can't. So, I think, on balance, translating a dead author is easier than translating a live author. Although, of course, you lose that sense of, you know, the interplay between yourself and the author. And certainly in Marlene's case, I think I found it less messy than you did. We had a slightly different procedure. I would go away and translate, send it to Marlene. She'd go through it, we'd meet and discuss. And then
That sounds almost civil.
It was actually very civil, and she cooks very well. We have good meals. So it was very Gezellig, actually. So I have no complaints on that one. So with some other translations, I've had more problems.
On that note,
Can I just add a footnote here, just in case people may have misunderstood me. Gezellig with Marlene, indeed, the messiness did not extend to no speaks.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. We were always friends, and we were always healthy, strong,
productive mess.
contention. And she does cook extremely well, and she has this fridge full of wonderfully packaged little leftovers. It's good to work with Marlene, but it's tough.
Yeah.
It's a good time. You've recently done the translation of Eben Venter's Wolf.
Yes.
What can we expect from that novel?
Well, it's an extraordinary novel. Again, it was taxing, perhaps less so than Agaat, certainly, less so than the Etienne van Heerden, which I also did. But again, something new. So you can also expect that it's, I think some people will be shocked by it. It's quite a fairly outspoken sort of novel, but I think people are getting used to that too by now. Yeah, I don't know what to say, what to expect. It's a good, strong story. It's very much South African based, you know, Cape Town. And it actually tackles an issue of pornography, which is one that, which may be where some people may have problems with it. I don't know. But it's very moving in the end. So, well, read it.
Wonderful. And it's out this week, if I'm not.
Yeah, I think it's been out.
I've just received copies.
Have you just, okay, I received my copy last week. So.
Okay, so it's brand new.
Yeah, they issuing the English and Afrikaans at the same time, I think, just about, because they've been holding fire on the Afrikaans till the English was done. So.
It's Because we used to have, the market of Afrikaans books and which one would rise above the rest and suggest it's for translation. But Afrikaans writers now, if they have sufficient clout, are getting onto this game of having both come out at the same time and get double impact.
Yeah, I think it's a marketing ploy, and I think quite a successful one. Because if a book has been around for a few years, perhaps, and it then gets translated, I think it's difficult to generate instances. If you can launch both, then you might. And English-speaking South African readers are notoriously bad at buying English South African books.
Yes.
Afrikaans books sell much better than English language South African books. So you need to get past that barrier of, especially if they feel, well, this is a book that's actually in Afrikaans. There's something quite parochial about the readership, and I think you need to break through that.
Footnote number 2. You also get double-barrel reception. So there's a distinct qualitative difference between Afrikaans literary reception in the country and English literary reception in the country. The Afrikaans literary reception is more invested because there isn't this sense of we're really just a little island, the biggest part of which is elsewhere. We are here, we are fully here, and for the Afrikaans literary or the Afrikaans critics. I mean that's the envy of, I think, of English writers in South Africa, unless they get big international exposure, which is not common.
Yes, Afrikaans readers by and large are pretty loyal. There is a readership, they're interested. I mean, look at the work set, Absolutely. So, as Leon says, one envies that. If one happens to be writing in English, you wish you could have that kind of loyal readership. I mean, I have some loyal readers and I'm very grateful to them. I don't want to offend them, but I wish I had more. Always more.
Michiel, I'd like to ask you about the sense of location and space that you employ in Lost Ground and Invisible Furies. What to you was the biggest difference in the two locations, and how did that Karoo setting as opposed to the city of Paris, how did that tie in with your, what I could call typical preoccupations with identity, with masculinity, belonging, otherness, things like that?
Yes, oddly, I think I was more confident about the Paris setting than about the Klein Karoo. I spent a weekend in Barrydale, just to get a feel for the place. And I don't really know the Klein Karoo at all. But I stayed in that hotel, which is very similar to the one that I describe in the book. I went for an early morning walk on Sunday. I took the photograph which appeared on the cover. I'm quite proud of that. And okay, I grew up in the Free State, in a small town, so you can extrapolate from that. So I think I had a sense of what a small town is, and of course the kind of characters you'll have. Paris was different. I mean, my book is very much a tourist's Paris. It's the only way I know Paris. I've spent many holidays there, but I've never lived there. And so I had the excuse that my main character is himself a visitor. So he's not an insider. I wouldn't dare try and write a novel about Paris from an insider's point of view. So it's tourist Paris, and that is something I know. And nowadays with Google, you take Google Earth and you go and see what it is. I'm writing a novel at the moment which is set in Italy, and I have a little village in Italy, and I go and check it out.
There you go. You said you don't believe your office.
You don't have to leave your office.
Get some leftovers from Marlene and set up.
Yeah. So the sense of place to some extent is manufactured. I don't quite know how it happens, but you start living in your head in that place, and you just hope it comes through. I think both of those novels I was very conscious of place. I think in Invisible Furies, Paris is sort of a major character in the novel, I think, in the sense that it's about being in Paris. In a way that perhaps Lost Ground is not about being in Barrydale or whatever it is.
Leon, I'd like to turn to you at this point. See the exemplars of your 3 volumes of poetry here. Take us through your evolution as a poet, up until where you're going now. In your most recent volume, Bodyhood, is very much centered on the body embodied experience, Umberto Maturana, his theories of bodyhood. Tell us a little bit about that.
I suppose one writes out of a sense of exigency and situation, existential and geographical and political. And Bloodsong was the first volume of poetry which emerged out of a very deep sense of the ties of blood. As I was starting out in a marriage with children, and was profoundly struck by the sense of imperilment that was paralleled by the intimate family situation and the national sort of being in a country that is imperiled, and how those two levels sometimes speak to each other and sometimes don't. And then I wrote Gone to the Edges 10 years later, which was quite directly a marriage breakup volume of poetry. It was a searing searchlight on that fracture, which and the novel is very. I mean, the poems are very direct about this. It's a deliberate sort of microscopic enlargement on what human beings can sometimes feel and what intensities they can feel in situations like that. So, in a sense, it was less political. It was more playful in poetic form, and a very strong volume, I think. Bodyhood is to some extent a series of poetic meditations.
It strikes me as probably your most intellectual one, which you read.
Well, people have said that, and I'm not too happy with that statement, because you never want to be too intellectual when you're writing poetry. You want to find the voice of something that arises from an organic sense of being in the world, not an over-rational sense of being in the world, or certainly not an academic sense of being in the world. Academics, there are plenty, but you don't want to be an academic when you're writing poetry. But definitely the sense of how a body articulates with its being in the world before even you get to the social. And how the body creates a language that then becomes socially embodied. And so it's just fine. I was looking to find those layers of communicative form that precede what we normally think of as the social communicative form. And poetry is just something that I return to as a matter of exigency. So one writes. I'm a sort of writer prostitute. I write anything that I can. I mean, I don't regard myself as a this or a that. I don't even think I'm a novelist. I don't think I'm a proper novelist. I will just write whatever comes to hand at the time. I need to speak. I need to write for whatever reason. It's a kind of a compulsion that will sometimes manifest in the form of essays. I'll sometimes write academic articles with a kind of mad frenzy that you reserve for supposedly creative work. I will write whatever speaks to the sort of exigency of writing that I'm facing, whatever form speaks to that. And that often depends on the means and the time you have available. So, I'm desperately hoping to follow in Michiel's footsteps and eventually retire early. As it creates some time to explore those forms. So I'm writing a fair amount of poetry at the moment, because I'm teaching like mad, and I'm grading a lot of papers.
It has heckled people, it has raised a lot of controversy. Tell me about your writing process. For me, when reading the novel, I was struck with an amazing kind of correlation with Portnoy's Complaint. And I heard those American authors like Marlene, Philip Roth, I heard them come through very strong, and a very strong fictional voice that's exuberant, that was not going to not say its piece. What kind of voice did you look for when you wrote this novel?
Okay, a difficult question, but I mean, it's very blandly and off the top of my head, it's a masculinist threnody, right? It's a masculinist threnody.
What is that?
Well, let me tell you. So, at the second moment of writing, that the voice that was coming to me was, I'm part of this male, patriarchal, sexist, gayist group, heterosexual on the whole, and I'm associated with this appalling bunch of genetic overreachers, men. And it is true that men are inherently, in many cases, aggressive, and all the words you would use about typical male behavior towards women, and particularly in this country. As a result, the discourse has developed. We've seen feminism and post-feminism, and in this country particularly, where there is almost no space whatsoever for a male voice that is healthy, rebellious, and also somewhat fatni-cockney, if I can say it in such a dramatic way. It's a kind of a resistance to the automatic reflex, unthinking.
I'm sorry, I'm a man.
Yeah, but also the assumption by women that politics among the sexes is a done deal. Right? It's like game over. You're a man, you're done. And there was this male voice that wanted to say, hang on, there is still a game of politics between men and women, right? But politics that occur in the kitchen, as opposed to the wider concentric circles of the institution and in politics and elsewhere, remain vital to power relations. I mean, that is almost your primordial sort of power play is between the genders, is between married people, between lovers, men and women. We're talking about now, there are other levels of politics as well, sexual politics. So sexual politics to me is an occluded area, and I felt that there was and there is a lot of space for a different kind of masculinity to emerge. Not sick, not retarded, not even necessarily patriarchal, but strong and healthy, and not in denial of its own strength, its own vitality, right? And also not in denial of women's complicity with many of the typically difficult patterns that emerge between men and women. I just find this is an area that is vastly underwritten, continues to be so in South African fiction. I just think you have to write it at a profound and complex level that also hooks into its social underpinnings.
Why now? Why did it take you so long to write this novel? Was it a fun novel to write? Did you enjoy pointing fingers?
So pointing fingers. I don't think that writing is ever fun. There was a passage of writing in...
Was this a novel that you had to write to purge?
Look, I started working at WITS in 2008 as head of the School of Literature and Language Studies, and I swore to myself that if I were going to do this managerial job, which did not really involve teaching unless I insisted on it, that I would not die as the person who writes. And so I went to bed very early, and I woke up every morning at 3, 4 a.m. and I wrote for 3, 4 hours. And there were moments in those passages of writing where the writing took flight, and that's a feeling Michiel will know that it's not always like that. But there were passages in that writing that were glorious in the way they took flight, where you feel extremely powerful for about 10 minutes. And then after you do that comes the difficult reworking, and you sit with this uneven manuscript and you need to rewrite it, or at least restructure it, and certainly rewrite some of the chapters, and that then is not fun. It's just very difficult, because especially when you're teaching and you're working. But on the whole, yes, it was a joyful project, because I see it as a work of prose styling. I mean, not a single reviewer has commented on this, but the styling of the prose was of great importance to me. The styling of the voice, so that what you read there is actually a voice speaking in this threnody, was extremely important to me. And I think I got some of that right.